What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. We are getting started. Week 1 picks. So excited for the 2023 college football season to start. Obviously, it started a little bit before last week. We got some appetizers with USC, Notre Dame, all those fun matchups that we got to see. We got to see, I think, a new and improved Fighting Irish team. But we're going to get into the Big Ten, the current Big Ten, not the future Big Ten, because USC obviously is in the future going to be in the conference. But we're going to talk about the Big Ten today and only the Big Ten. If you like the podcast, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, send me an email at bigtenfootballtalk@gmail.com. Before I get into this, I do want to point out something. I had mentioned that someone left a 1-star review, which I totally am okay with. You know, that obviously it's okay if people leave feedback, and the person put his name to it. I think it was Bryce 10 Barge or Barge 10 Bryce. I forget the username. But I wanted to highlight what he said because I think he was absolutely right. And it actually identifies what this podcast is versus what this podcast is not. So he wrote, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically he was ripping the podcast because I had mentioned in the beginning that I thought I knew what I was going to pick, and then I had listened to other podcasts, and now I don't know. And what I meant by that was I got more information. And I don't know if this is what he meant by this feedback, but I think what he wanted was for me to just say what I think and not think about anybody else. Basically, he said, I'll just listen to those other podcasts. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want, that's fine. I am not, and I'm not saying he was saying this about me, but I just want to be very clear. I'm not a shock jock. I'm not here to give hot takes and just spout my opinion. I certainly give my opinion. But listen, I admit when I'm wrong. I get more information because, there's this biblical principle of getting wisdom. I think in college football's standpoint, it's acquiring knowledge. But still, I want to make the most informed opinion possible. And I want to analyze well. And so if you're just looking for me to just state what I say and stand by it through thick and thin, that's not me. That's not this podcast. I'm not Colin Cowherd or Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith. Not that he was saying that that's what I was trying to be. I'm going to change my mind because I get more information. And by the way, I wasn't just parroting those podcasts. I was just saying, it made me think, especially in the context that this is the most difficult year in terms of thinking preseason. Because in the past couple years, even though Ohio State hasn't finished first, Ohio State has easily been the most talented team. And so it's just kind of easy, to kind of think, okay, I think Ohio State from a talent perspective is going to win. But the reality is, I think Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, maybe even to a lesser degree, all I think have really good shots to win the Big Ten. I think all 4 of those teams could make the playoff this year. I think if we were in a 12-team playoff, I think all 4 of those teams would be in my playoff pool at the beginning of the season. So that's what makes it hard. And I was just being honest. And that's what I am. If you like that, then this is a podcast for you. If you don't like that, then go listen to someone who's going to be very firm in their opinion and never own up to their mistakes. And that's pretty much what ESPN does all the time. So I'm not ESPN. Cool. All right, now that we've got that, I am going to get to some picks, and I'm excited about this opening weekend. I think some good matchups in week one. Week one is not always very, very competitive, but we've got a few conference matchups, and we've got, I think, some tricky group of 5 games. I think the one Power 5 non-conference game is actually going to be a bit of a joke, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I'm going to do the first 5 games, take a break, and then we'll come back and finish it out. So first game, I'm recording this on Tuesday night. It's coming out Wednesday morning. Thursday night, it's Nebraska, Minnesota. Minnesota, a 7-point favorite over Nebraska. It's going to be on Fox at 8 p.m. I believe Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt will be on the call for this. The best color commentator, play-by-play duo, I think, in college football right now. I think they're great. I know Gus Johnson's a little, he has an acquired taste, but I love him. I think he's great. But it's a Thursday night game. My big question for Nebraska is, has the roster bought in to Matt Rule? Xavier Betts, he was one of the projected starting receivers. He's no longer with the team, left. I don't know, and maybe Cornhusker fans, you can fill me in a little bit more. Don't know what is going on there. I think that actually might be a good thing, but it's still, it still raises this question of, okay, here's a potential starting receiver that's left the team with the new coach. And so what's going on? Is that a good loss? Is that a not good loss? From some reports, it seems like defense has dominated in scrimmages. I think that makes sense. They have more returning on that side of the ball. They have a new quarterback in Jeff Sims. I think they will try to lean on the run early, hopefully get Kemp and Washington free on the outside. That's the receivers. Minnesota will still try to run. Obviously no Ibrahim, but they've got a good stable of backs. I also think their receivers, I think they're very underrated. And Spanford at tight end, obviously, I think might be the best tight end in the conference. I think Khalid Manis took his lumps last year, but I think that was to take a leap this year. Offensive line is a concern, but I don't think Nebraska has the dudes on the D-line yet. I know their defense has been good, but I don't think that's going to be a matchup that Nebraska wins enough to be able to win this game. I do think it's lower scoring. I've got Minnesota 24, Nebraska 20 in a Thursday night thriller. So Nebraska covers, but I've got Minnesota winning in a tight game. Friday night, September 1st, we have Central Michigan at Michigan State. It's a 7 p.m. kick on FS1. Michigan State is a 14-point favorite. I'm surprised that the line is that low. Although I think people realize that Michigan State's not the Michigan State of 2021, the Michigan State under D'Antonio. It might be a bit tough for Michigan State offensively in this game. Central Michigan has 9 defensive starters back, so they're a veteran group. I think they could be a MAC West contender, although I think Toledo is probably gonna rule the conference, which we'll talk about later in the show. Mel Tucker hasn't officially stated who the starting quarterback will be, either Noah Kim or Hauser, Caton Hauser. Berger's a good tailback for them. Not Kenneth Walker. He's not that caliber, but he's a good tailback for them. They have a good receiver in Trey Mosley. I think it's going to be a test early, but the Spartans, I think, behind their veteran offensive line, they put away the Chippewas middle of the third quarter. I got Michigan State 38, Central Michigan 21. Not backdoor cover. Michigan State will cover in the fourth quarter, I think. Eastern Carolina versus number 2 Michigan. That's number 2 according to the AP poll. I think the Pirates were already going to have a tough climb against Michigan. It does not help when they're replacing almost all their skill position players. They're young. They're inexperienced against a defense coached by Jesse Minter that wants to disrupt and get turnovers. This will be a bloodbath. Michigan 56, East Carolina 10. I wouldn't be surprised if that 10 is actually more like a 3 or a 7, but I'm gonna assume that Michigan has second and third stringers and that East Carolina gets a cheap touchdown at the end. That's going to be 12 p.m. on Peacock. One thing to note, I believe you have to have the premium version of Peacock to be able to watch this game. You can't have the free version. $5.99 a month, not a bad gig. It stinks that you have to pay for it, but it's $5.99. It's not per month, so you get 4 weeks for $5.99. Still a bummer, but Michigan is a 36-point favorite. I have them covering. Utah State versus number 25 Iowa. The Aggies have a good wide receiver in Terrell Vaughn. Look out for him. He could be a playmaker for Utah State. Still, Iowa is too stout on the offensive and defensive lines. And I think it's going to provide a good first test for Cade McNamara, who has been medically cleared for Saturday. He was a bit questionable, but I think he will play well. I think he'll make good use of the tight end, Lachey, Schoonmaker there obviously as well. Sorry, not Schoonmaker, Eric All. Goodness, I totally switched up Michigan transfer tight ends. All that to say, I think Iowa will do well. I don't think it'll be much of a test for Iowa. I've got Iowa 34, Utah State 13. That game is on at 12 p.m. on FS1. Iowa is a 25-point favorite, so I do have Utah State covering in that game. Before we take a break here, I'm going to do Fresno State and Purdue. That game is 12 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Purdue is a 3.5-point favorite, and that should tell you something, because if this is a neutral site, it would basically be a pick'em. So Mikey Keene transfers in from UCF for Fresno State. He was pretty good for UCF. A lot of youth, no returning starters at the skill positions for Fresno State. However, they returned 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, 6 of their front 7 on defense, and their left tackle on offense, Abou, transfers in from Kansas State. Purdue also coming in with some question marks. They thought they were set at receiver. Corey Gamage and Jamal Edrine both seemed positioned to play. Both were transfers, but Gamage actually flipped to UCF, and so he's actually playing for UCF now. Edrine tore his ACL I believe in camp. Sheffield obviously has had his moments, over 800 yards the past 2 seasons, and Maccabee was really good at running back last year. I think the main question is, can the other receivers step up? Can Ryan Walters get this defense to get in shape and to avoid an upset? I like Ryan Walters. I think he will be a good coach, and I think Hudson Card can be really, really good. I just like Fresno State and Jeff Tedford. Jeff Tedford, the coach there, he really knows what he's doing. I think they repeat a lot of their success from a year ago, even with the new cast of characters. I've got Fresno State upsetting the Boilermakers on the road, 27-21. Let me take a break, and then we'll be back with the last 6 games.
Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Welcome back to the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. Number 3, Ohio State versus Indiana. Kyle McCord will start at quarterback for Ohio State, but Devin Brown will play for the Buckeye quarterbacks. The Indiana quarterback situation is also a question mark, but I think indications are that Taven Jackson, the Tennessee transfer, will get the nod. Brendan Sorsby will probably also get some run. I don't know how that's going to work, but that's my guess. It'll be interesting to see if the Hoosiers' skill position players can exploit a Buckeye defense that is looking to show improvement from a year ago. Cam Camper was really good until he got hurt. I think 560 yards in 7 starts, maybe 8 games total, I think. So I think the Hoosiers have some guys that I think will at least show whether Ohio State has learned from last year. If Jim Knowles' defense takes a leap forward, I think they will. Although I do think Indiana will get a couple scores. I think, though, the past couple years, Ohio State's elite athleticism has just proved too much for the Hoosiers. Even with the rotating quarterbacks, I don't see them putting up much of a fight here. I think Travion Henderson is going to remind folks why he was the number 1 tailback coming out of high school in 2021. Big day for him. I think the receivers will get theirs. Name to watch out for, Carnell Tate, who has been getting rave reviews in camp. I like Ohio State big, 55-17. That game is on CBS at 3:30, where I believe Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson will be calling the game. Ohio State is a 30-point favorite. I have them covering. I'm just going to make an aside. I haven't seen Gary Danielson really call a game much outside of SEC games of interest. I feel like he gets a ton of hate. And I know he was kind of an SEC, kind of became an SEC homer because he's covering the SEC. But, like, that was who he's covering. And I don't know. I remember Gary Danielson back when he was back with ABC, and I remember thinking that he and Brent Musburger were a great team. And I'm excited to have an Ohio State game called by Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler. I love Brad Nessler. Brad Nessler's great. I was sad when Brad Nessler and Todd Blackledge got separated when Nessler went to CBS, but that's neither here nor there. 3:30 p.m. on FS1, you've got Buffalo at number 19, Wisconsin. Wisconsin a 28-point favorite. Buffalo has a trio of good defenders that you should be on the lookout for. Damon Williams, Sean Dolak, and Marcus Fuqua. However, they don't have a ton of returning experience. They have those 3 guys, but I think, and I have a couple other guys to watch out for too, but really I think Wisconsin's experience up front, along with the 1-2 punch of Braylon Allen and Chez Malusi, is going to loosen them up for the beginning of Phil Longo's air raid attack. And mark this down, I think Tanner Mordecai announces his presence as maybe the best quarterback in the Big Ten with this game. I really like Tanner Mordecai. Transfer from SMU. I think he's going to be great in that offense. And I think with the presence of Allen and Malusi in the backfield, I think that's going to be a big-time upgrade for the Badgers. Give me Wisconsin 49, Buffalo 13. At 3:30 on the Big Ten Network, you've got Towson at Maryland. There's kind of a recurring theme with Maryland when they get these FCS games. They murder them. I mean, just absolutely overmatch them. I don't think there's not much analysis to this game other than Towson's not good and Maryland's going to score. I've got Maryland 63, Towson 6. Very easy analysis. We're going to move to West Virginia at number 7, Penn State. The game is on NBC, 7:30. Penn State's a 20.5 point favorite. That's a big line for a Power 5 non-conference matchup. It should be bigger. It should be bigger. West Virginia was 5-7 last year. They had 2 upset wins against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma also had the worst season in their past 25 years or so, and Oklahoma State was in a tailspin at that point. So, like, whatever optimism that Mountaineers fans have, be like, oh, this, we upset Oklahoma last year. So what? Like, Oklahoma was a shell of themselves last year, right? West Virginia returns 13 starters off a not great team. They don't have a lot of program momentum. Like, they're probably a basement team in the Big 12. Like, they're not going to be good. Penn State has a good offensive line, the best offensive line in Franklin's tenure. He has maybe the best 1-2 punch at running back that he's had. It's hard to say that because of you had Miles Sanders behind Saquon, but they're really good. It's the best combo of offensive line and running backs that Penn State's had under Franklin. Let's put it that way, because could you imagine Saquon with a good offensive line? Gosh, man, it's sad that we never got to see that. Don't be surprised also if Penn State's defense makes a couple of scoring plays with their back seven. I think their back seven might be the best in college football. I think Drew Aller gets his first start. He looks very good. Penn State 52, West Virginia 6. Then we go to Toledo, Illinois, 7:30 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Honestly, this might be the best game of the week. It's not going to be easy for Illinois. Like, there's a lot of turnover on the back end, and Toledo they have 8 starters back on each side of the ball. Daquan Finn is no joke at quarterback. So I think Toledo is going to give Illinois everything they want. Right? And remember, I've been on the Illinois train with Brett Bielema, right? Called the upset at Nebraska 2 years ago. Or not at Nebraska, but when Nebraska came in, everybody thought Scott Frost was going to beat him. And I'm like, nope, Illinois. I was fairly high on Illinois last year. Thought they were going to be good. I think Illinois gets it done, but don't let this game dissuade you from thinking that Illinois could have a good year this year. Because I think Toledo is probably going to win the MAC. And I think Daquan Finn is a guy who, in a year or two, transfers to a Power 5 program to see if he can make a run at the NFL. Like, he is that dynamic. He's got a great arm. Really, really like him. Ultimately, I do think Illinois' defense makes enough stops, and I think Illinois' offense is able to power their way through to a win. And I think they get a couple of big plays from Isaiah Williams and other guys on the outside. Illinois 28, Toledo 20. The line is 9.5 points. I don't have Illinois covering, but I think it's going to be a great game. Last but not least, well, maybe it's least, I don't know. Northwestern versus Rutgers. Sorry, I shouldn't take shots at Northwestern and Rutgers. I'm sorry, guys. I really want to be equitable to you guys, to you fans, because it is a game against two of the least talented teams in the Big Ten. I think for one team, I do think Rutgers, they've not been great, but I do think Schiano has a little juice going, and I think, he really could. He could keep things going in a positive direction, even with a losing season this year, because you're building, and then you get to no divisions where you don't have to deal with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State every year. So I think Rutgers, they've got guys. I think Wimsatt's a raw prospect at quarterback, but I still really like his ability to create. He's got a year now under his belt, although he was hurt for a lot of last season. Langan at tight end is a steady presence. Their running back core, it's not elite, it's not great, but it's good enough. I think Manungai is a good player. I think they have several other backs that I think they're really high on Young and one other that I can't. I totally forget his name right now. But they've got a stable of backs that they can really rely on. I think my question with Northwestern is they don't have a lot of talent. They switched coaches. Like David Braun was coming, he came in to fix the defense, and now he's the head coach. And it's after Pat Fitzgerald getting fired, and it seems like there's some stuff going on higher up with the president and the athletic department, and like where are they? Where's their psyche? Like I'd imagine that they're motivated to hit somebody, right? Like they're motivated to get on the field and do something. But will it be controlled? Will it be well coached? And I just don't know. And then you get to the talent. Mangieri might be the only guy that really, I'm like, okay, like he's a decent tight end. I think they're super back. Cam Porter at running back, he's had some good moments. But honestly, I just don't see it. And as much as I don't think Rutgers has a ton of talent, I do think the gap between Northwestern and Rutgers actually might be a little bigger than we realize. The line is 6.5. This game is on Sunday, by the way. Sunday, 12 p.m., CBS. Rutgers is a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under is 39.5. I have the under. Rutgers 24, Northwestern 13. I think Rutgers covers. I hope I'm wrong for Wildcats fans' sake. I just don't think Northwestern, this is going to be a good year for them. I said that in my predictions. I think Rutgers, I would not be surprised if Rutgers wins by more. I just think Rutgers, as much as their record doesn't show it necessarily, I do think they are getting better. And I think that's going to show in this game. So that'll do it for the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. Thanks for listening. This has been Zach Guggenheim. Take care. God bless.